So continuing our discussion, the cost of retained earning, CAPM approach. This is the capital asset pricing model here. The required rate of return. I also like to think of it as the fair return in relation to the market is equal to the risk-free rate. There we go. Plus the return on the market minus the risk-free rate multiplied by the beta for that stock. So we have a situation, our risk-free rate 6%, return on the market is 10.5%, and the stock has a beta of 1.6. It's simple that the required rate of return on that stock, or fair return, is 6 plus 10.5, the return on the market, minus the 6%, and then multiplied by the beta. I like looking at it with the beta first. That's the way I learned it. So, but either way works out. So we move on from the CAPM approach to the discounted cash flow approach for cost of retained earnings. The mentioned this one previously. The cost of retained earnings are R sub S. Our expected return, and we're basically using our constant growth model. I want to point out a few things here. This is the dividend yield, the expected dividend in the coming year, or D1. So that's dividend yield. The current market of the price divided by the current market price, and then the capital gains yield is equal to the growth rate. So if we rearrange the formula and go with our constant growth model, I don't normally put the hats on them. So the market price of the stock is equal to the dividend, and think of it as the next dividend, or the dividend in the coming year, divided by the required rate of return minus the growth rate. This is also equal to D0 times 1 plus G divided by R minus G. So we need to pay attention to whether that dividend, when we're solving these problems, where the dividend was just paid, or last year's, which would be D0, so we'd have to grow it, versus the dividend in the coming year. So example here, firm is growing at a constant rate of 7.5%, is expected to pay a dividend of $1.28 at the end of the common year. The stock currently sells at a price of $22. So it's telling us that G is 7.5%, D1 is $1.28, and then P0 is $22. So we can plug that in, and we can come up with the cost of retained earnings based on the discounted cash flow approach. So we take our dividend, because it's D0, it's $1.28 divided by the market price of the stock, plus our 7.5% growth rate, 0.075. So that $1.28 divided by 22 is 0.058, plus the 0.075, that's 0.133, or 13.3%. And then the third method for cost of retained earnings is the bond yield plus premium approach. So studies show that return on equity for a particular firm is somewhere between 3 and 5% higher than its before tax cost of debt, R sub D. So general rule of thumb, firms estimate cost of retained earnings by adding 3 to 5%, based on that firm. So, example, if the before tax cost of debt is 10%, then we might estimate the cost of retained earnings as, using the midpoint 10 plus the 4% midpoint, so 14% for our cost of retained earnings using the bond yield plus premium approach. The cost of retained earnings, 3 approaches we use to determine the retained earnings give different results. The reason is these 3 approaches are based on different assumptions. CAPM approach assumes investors are well diversified, and many other assumptions that go along with the CAPM. Discounted cash flow approach assumes that firms grow at a constant rate. We know that's not realistic. Bond yield plus premium approach assumes that return on equity is related to the cost of debt. So ideally, all 3 approaches should give the same result, but that's not likely to be the case. So some firms potentially could average that result. So they just add up the 3 results and divide by 3. And so the cost of newly issued common stock. So we're taking these steps of this one step forward, the cost of external equity. So RSB or subscript D, rate of return required by common stockholders after considering the cost of issuing new stock, flotation costs, or as I prefer, issuance costs. So the RSB is formula this is the discounted cash flow approach. Next year's expected dividend divided by the price of the stock minus or multiplied by 1 minus flotation cost. So it's the equal to the dividend, next year's dividend divided by the net proceeds per share plus plus the constant growth rate on the stock. So F is the flotation cost stated as a decimal. So be given in the problems as a percentage. You'll have to consider that when doing the calculations. So the cost of new equity is greater than the cost of retained earnings. R sub E is greater than R sub S because the firm has to pay flotation costs. Example here, we have a firm that's growing at a constant rate of 7.5%, expected to pay a dividend of $1.28. The stock currently sells for $22. This is the example we did before, actually. So 17% cost for an investment banker. That's an extremely high amount. Typically, an investment banker for underwriting stocks would charge anywhere from maybe 6 to 8%, or possibly even less, depending on the firm. So the only difference in the previous calculation is the this actually should be R sub B. The cost of external equity. We take our expected dividend and divide it by the price of the stock multiplied by 1 minus the flotation cost of 17% and add our 7.5% growth rate. So comes out to 14.5%.